My name is Cheryl, and I'm 53 years old. I always believed that love meant putting your family first, no matter what. For 25 years, I saved every penny I could as a single mother, dreaming of the day I'd give my daughter Emma the perfect wedding. I spent $28,000 to make her dreams come true. But on her wedding day, her fiancé looked me straight in the eye and told me to leave the celebration I had paid for. I smiled sweetly and told him I'd be right back. What happened next changed everything forever. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now let me tell you about the day I learned that sometimes love means fighting back. Emma has been my whole world since her father walked out on us when she was just 8 years old. I remember that devastating Tuesday morning when he packed his bags and announced he'd found someone younger, someone who understood his needs better. As he drove away in his silver sedan, Emma pressed her little face against our living room window, tears streaming down her cheeks, asking when Daddy would come home. From that moment on, I made a sacred promise to myself and to her I would be everything she needed. Mother, father, cheerleader, and protector all rolled into one. Working as a dental office manager didn't pay much, but I stretched every dollar until it screamed. We had our weekly coffee dates at the little cafe downtown, where Emma would order hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and tell me about her dreams. Even at 10 years old, she'd describe her future wedding in vivid detail. She wanted white roses everywhere, a dress that sparkled like starlight, and a celebration where everyone she loved could dance together. I'd listen to every word, taking mental notes and secretly calculating how much I'd need to save. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every secondhand coat I bought instead of a new one went into what I privately called Emma's Dream Fund. Our shopping trips were precious adventures. Emma would try on my old wedding dress from the attic, spinning around in the yellowed satin, while I hemmed the impossibly long train. She'd play wedding with her dolls, always making sure the mother doll had the best seat at the ceremony. Those innocent moments filled my heart with such pure joy that I forgot about my own loneliness, my own abandoned dreams. As she grew older, our bond only strengthened. During her teenage years, when other mothers complained about rebellious daughters, Emma would curl up next to me on our worn blue sofa and share her hopes, fears, and secrets. She worried about my happiness, always asking if I was dating anyone or if I felt sad about being alone. I'd brush away her concerns with gentle reassurance, telling her that having her was worth more than any romantic relationship could ever be. Emma developed into such a remarkable young woman, compassionate, intelligent, and fiercely protective of me. When classmates made cruel jokes about her thrift store clothes or our small apartment, she'd defend our life with pride. She understood sacrifice because she'd watched me make it gladly every single day. College scholarships helped, but I still worked double shifts to cover her expenses, feeling grateful for every exhausted moment that contributed to her bright future. The night she graduated with her nursing degree, Emma threw her arms around me in the parking lot and whispered that everything good in her life came from my love and determination. I believed our bond was unbreakable, forged in years of mutual respect and deep affection. She promised that when her wedding day came, she'd make sure I felt like the queen I'd always made her feel like. Emma had been dating Blake for 6 months when she nervously brought him home for Sunday dinner. I spent all morning preparing her favorite pot roast, cleaning our modest apartment, until everything gleamed, and arranging fresh flowers from the grocery store in my best vase. My hands trembled slightly as I set the table with our good china, wanting desperately to make a perfect first impression. Blake arrived precisely on time, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He was undeniably handsome, with his perfectly styled brown hair and confident smile, but something in his pale blue eyes made me uncomfortable from the very first handshake. His grip was firm, but his gaze swept over our small living room with barely concealed judgment. During dinner, he complimented my cooking with words that somehow felt hollow. Everything he said contained subtle hints of superiority. When Emma mentioned how I'd worked 2 jobs to put her through nursing school, Blake nodded and said it was admirable that some people could be satisfied with simple lives. The comment stung, but Emma beamed at him so adoringly that I forced myself to smile. He talked extensively about his family's real estate empire, dropping names of exclusive country clubs and luxury vacation destinations like breadcrumbs meant to impress. When I mentioned enjoying walks in our local park, he suggested that I really should experience professional landscaping to understand what true beauty looked like. Emma laughed as if he'd made a charming joke, but I caught the condescension dripping from his words. The most troubling moments happened when Emma spoke fondly about our traditions. She described our weekly coffee dates, and Blake interrupted to say that hopefully she'd outgrow such juvenile habits. When she mentioned how I'd saved for years to give her a beautiful wedding, Blake's eyebrows rose in surprise, and he asked exactly how much I'd managed to accumulate. The question felt invasive and calculating. Throughout the evening, Blake's behavior shifted depending on Emma's attention. When she was in the room, he'd put his arm around her possessively and speak to me with forced politeness. The moment she stepped into the kitchen to refill drinks, his facade would crack. He'd check his expensive watch, examine his manicured nails, or stare out the window with obvious boredom. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment, feeling deeply unsettled. Emma called within an hour, gushing about how much Blake liked me and how happy she was that we'd finally met. She said he thought I was sweet and hard-working, though she mentioned he'd suggested I might want to consider updating my wardrobe for future gatherings. The suggestion hit me like a slap, but Emma delivered it as if he'd given helpful fashion advice. Over the following months, Blake's true colors became increasingly apparent. He'd comment on my car, suggesting that someone of my age deserved something more reliable than my 15-year-old Toyota. He'd notice my comfortable shoes and mention how proper footwear could really elevate a woman's appearance. Each criticism came wrapped in fake concern, delivered with a patronizing smile that made my skin crawl. The engagement announcement came on a rainy Thursday evening. Emma called me at work, sobbing with joy as she described Blake's elaborate proposal at an upscale restaurant. My heart should have soared with happiness for her, but instead I felt a cold dread settling in my chest. I managed to say all the right words, congratulating her and expressing excitement about wedding planning. But that night, I lay awake wondering how to protect my daughter from a man I was growing to despise. When I offered to pay for Emma's entire wedding, Blake's reaction revealed everything I needed to know about his character. His eyes lit up with greedy calculation as I explained the $28,000 I'd saved over the years. Within minutes, he was pulling out his phone to show Emma pictures of venues that would cost every penny of my nest egg. The Grandview Manor became his obsession. This sprawling estate charged $15,000 just for the venue rental, but Blake insisted that anything less would be embarrassing for Emma. I watched my daughter's face as he painted pictures of elegant ballrooms and manicured gardens, seeing her fall deeper under his spell with each lavish description. When I gently suggested a lovely local venue that would cost half as much, Blake dismissed it immediately, saying Emma deserved better than community center receptions. Wedding planning meetings became exercises in humiliation. Blake would arrive with typed lists of requirements, speaking directly to vendors as if I wasn't even present. When the florist asked about my preferences for centerpieces, Blake answered before I could speak, explaining that the mother of the bride had simple tastes that might not align with their sophisticated vision. The woman looked confused, glancing between us uncertainly, while I sat there burning with embarrassment. The cake consultation proved to be a breaking point. I'd researched local bakeries for weeks, finding a talented woman who created beautiful custom designs at reasonable prices. Emma and I had always dreamed of a 3-tier vanilla cake with delicate sugar flowers, something elegant but not ostentatious. Blake took one look at the portfolio and announced that his family expected fondant work from premium decorators, regardless of the additional cost. When I tried to express my opinion, Blake actually held up his hand to stop me mid-sentence. He turned to the baker and explained that while he appreciated input from all family members, the final decisions needed to reflect appropriate standards for their social circle. Emma squeezed my hand apologetically, but she didn't contradict him. Watching my daughter choose his approval over my feelings broke something deep inside my chest. The dress shopping experience became another battlefield. Emma had always imagined wearing something similar to my wedding gown, updated and tailored to her style. We'd talked about it for years, planning to visit the same boutique where I'd found my dress decades earlier. Blake insisted on accompanying us to ensure Emma chose something worthy of the expensive venue. At the boutique, Blake positioned himself like a judge, critiquing each option Emma tried on. When she emerged in a simple, graceful gown that made her look radiant, I gasped with genuine admiration. Blake frowned and suggested she try something with more dramatic details, something that would photograph better against the manor's opulent backdrop. The dress he preferred cost 3 times as much and overwhelmed Emma's delicate features, but she chose it because he smiled approvingly. During the final fitting, Blake made his most hurtful comment yet. As Emma stood on the platform in her elaborate gown, he suggested that I might want to wear something less noticeable for the ceremony. He explained that the mother of the bride should complement the wedding party without drawing attention away from the happy couple. His recommendation was that I choose a simple beige or gray dress, something that would blend into the background. Emma looked uncomfortable with his suggestion, but she didn't defend me. Instead, she suggested we could shop together for something appropriate. The word appropriate echoed in my mind for days afterward, making me realize that Blake had convinced my daughter that I was somehow inadequate as I was. This man was systematically erasing my importance in Emma's life, and she was allowing it to happen. The final vendor payments emptied my savings account completely. Every dollar I'd carefully accumulated through years of sacrifice disappeared into Blake's vision of perfection. I signed check after check, watching decades of hard work fund a celebration where I was being positioned as an embarrassing afterthought. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was paying for the privilege of being humiliated. The morning of Emma's wedding arrived with crystal clear skies and perfect September weather. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning as anxiety gnawed at my stomach, but I was determined to make this day beautiful for my daughter, regardless of my personal feelings about Blake. I arrived at the Grandview Manor 2 hours early, wanting to ensure every detail was perfect. The venue looked absolutely stunning in the morning light. White roses cascaded from every surface, exactly as Emma had dreamed about during those childhood coffee dates. The florist had outdone herself, creating breathtaking arrangements that transformed the ballroom into a fairy tale setting. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing rainbows across crisp white linens, and the cake table displayed the elaborate fondant masterpiece Blake had insisted upon. I wore the navy blue dress I'd selected after trying on dozens of options, determined to find something elegant enough to meet Blake's standards without outshining the bride. The sales associate had assured me it was perfect for the mother of the bride, sophisticated and flattering without being attention-grabbing. I'd paired it with my grandmother's pearl necklace and low-heeled pumps, feeling confident that I looked appropriate and respectful. The first guests began arriving around 4 o'clock for the 5:30 ceremony. Blake's family made their grand entrance in luxury cars, the women dripping with jewelry and designer gowns that probably cost more than my annual salary. They air-kissed each other dramatically and spoke in voices loud enough to ensure everyone noticed their expensive accessories and exclusive vacation stories. I positioned myself near the entrance to greet arriving guests, wanting to fulfill my role as mother of the bride with grace and warmth. Emma's nursing colleagues arrived with genuine smiles and heartfelt congratulations, sharing stories about how much they admired my daughter's compassion and skill. These authentic moments reminded me why I'd sacrificed everything for this day, why Emma's happiness mattered more than my own comfort. Blake appeared around 5:15 with his groomsmen, immediately beginning his obsessive inspection of every detail. He examined the flower arrangements with a critical eye, adjusted place cards that were already perfectly positioned, and questioned vendors about their schedules with the intensity of a military general. His nervous energy infected the entire space, turning what should have been joyful anticipation into anxious tension. As cocktail hour began after the ceremony, I felt genuinely proud watching Emma glow with happiness in her elaborate gown. She looked radiant despite my personal feelings about her dress choice, and seeing her smile made every sacrifice worthwhile. Guests complimented the beautiful venue and elegant decorations, and I accepted their praise graciously, while privately calculating the cost of each compliment. Blake's parents held court near the bar, regaling anyone who would listen with stories about their son's accomplishments and their family's social connections. They barely acknowledged my presence, treating me like hired help, rather than the woman who'd raised the bride and funded their son's perfect day. Their dismissive attitude should have warned me about what was coming. The moment that changed everything happened near the champagne table. I was speaking with Emma's former roommate about nursing school memories when Blake approached with purposeful strides. His expression was serious, almost businesslike, as he positioned himself directly in front of me. The conversation around us continued normally, guests unaware that my world was about to shatter. Blake's words hit me like physical blows. "Cheryl, I need you to leave now. You're making guests uncomfortable." The statement was delivered with calm authority, as if he was discussing weather or asking about dinner preferences. I stared at him in complete shock, certain I'd misunderstood his meaning. When I asked for clarification, his response was even more brutal. "Look around. You don't fit here. Emma will understand." His pale blue eyes held no warmth, no acknowledgement of my feelings, or my financial contribution to his perfect day. This man, who had never worked a day for anything in his life, was dismissing the woman who'd paid for his wedding celebration. Other guests were beginning to notice our tense conversation, though they couldn't hear the specific words being exchanged. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as Blake's cruelty sank in completely. He was asking me to leave my own daughter's wedding, the celebration I'd funded with decades of careful saving, because my presence embarrassed him in front of his wealthy family and friends. His final threat sealed my decision about what happened next. "Don't make a scene, just go quietly." The assumption that I would comply meekly, that I would slink away in shame rather than defend myself, revealed how completely he'd underestimated the woman who'd raised Emma single-handedly for 25 years. I smiled at Blake with genuine sweetness, feeling a strange calm settle over my racing heart. "Of course," I said pleasantly. "I'll be right back." The lie rolled off my tongue easily, because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. This man was about to learn that some battles choose their own warriors. Walking to my car in the Manor's parking lot, I felt strangely peaceful despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. 25 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own had ended the moment Blake ordered me to disappear from my daughter's wedding. I sat in my Toyota, pulled out my phone, and began making the most satisfying calls of my entire life. The catering manager answered on the second ring. Good evening, this is Patricia from Elegant Events. I explained calmly that I needed to cancel my payment authorization immediately due to unexpected circumstances. Her shocked silence lasted several seconds before she asked if I was certain about the decision. When I confirmed that I was completely sure, she explained that the food service would need to stop immediately since the contract required payment before service continuation. My second call went to the florist, who'd created those stunning white rose arrangements. The young woman who answered sounded confused when I requested immediate removal of all decorations I'd purchased. She explained that taking arrangements during an active event was unusual, but when I reminded her that I'd paid for every single flower personally, she agreed to send her crew immediately for pickup. The photographer proved more challenging to reach since he was actively working the event, but his assistant assured me that without payment confirmation, all photography services would cease immediately. She mentioned that the photographer would need to pack up his equipment and leave the venue, which suited my purposes perfectly. Blake's precious wedding photos would end exactly when he'd demanded my departure. Calling the DJ brought particular satisfaction. The music was currently providing elegant background ambiance for cocktail hour, but that would end the moment I canceled the payment authorization. The vendor confirmed that sound equipment removal would begin immediately, and he apologized for any inconvenience the sudden change might cause the wedding party. My final vendor call went to the venue coordinator. This conversation required delicate handling, since the manor itself wasn't fully paid through my funds, but several key services were tied to my payment authorizations. When I explained the situation, the coordinator expressed deep concern about the impact on the current event. I felt no sympathy whatsoever for their predicament. Each cancellation call brought waves of empowerment I'd never experienced before. For decades, I'd absorbed disrespect and swallowed my pride to keep peace in my relationships. Watching Blake's perfect day crumble through my car window felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 25 years. This was what standing up for myself looked like, and it was magnificent. My phone began buzzing with frantic calls from the wedding planner as vendors started disappearing from the reception. Blake's number appeared repeatedly on my screen, but I let every call go to voicemail. The panic in their voices when they left messages only strengthened my resolve. They were learning that actions have consequences, even for people accustomed to getting everything they want. Through the manor's large windows, I could see confusion spreading through the reception as appetizers vanished from serving tables and the background music suddenly stopped. Guests looked around uncertainly, while Blake gestured frantically at remaining vendors, clearly trying to understand what was happening to his carefully orchestrated celebration. The sight of his distress filled me with grim satisfaction, but I wasn't finished yet. Blake had challenged the wrong woman, and he was about to discover that I had one more surprise planned for his perfect evening. I scrolled through my contacts and placed one final call to someone whose presence would complete my revenge in the most poetic way possible. My friend Sarah answered immediately. As a successful attorney who'd built her practice from nothing, she understood exactly what it meant to be underestimated by arrogant men. When I explained what had happened and asked for her help, she didn't hesitate for a single second. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she promised. "This should be interesting." Returning to the manor with Sarah felt like walking into battle with the perfect ally. My friend looked stunning in her black power suit, carrying her leather briefcase and wearing the confident expression that had intimidated opposing counsel for 15 years. As we approached the venue's entrance, I could hear the chaos Blake was desperately trying to manage inside. The scene inside the ballroom was beautifully chaotic. Vendors were systematically removing equipment and decorations, while confused guests stood around holding empty champagne glasses. The elaborate cake still dominated its table, but the surrounding flower arrangements had vanished completely. Without background music, every conversation was awkwardly audible, and the festive atmosphere had evaporated entirely. Blake stood near the bar, his face flushed red as he argued with the catering manager about the disappearing appetizers. His groomsmen clustered around him uncertainly, clearly confused about why their friend's perfect wedding was falling apart so spectacularly. Emma stood near the cake table in her elaborate gown, tears streaming down her face, as she watched her dream day disintegrate. The moment Blake spotted me entering with Sarah, his expression shifted from panic to fury. He stormed across the ballroom with determined strides, clearly planning to confront me about the vendor cancellations. His expensive tuxedo looked rumpled, and his perfectly styled hair was disheveled from running his hands through it in frustration. Before Blake could reach us, I stepped forward and addressed the room with clear authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to share something important with all of you." The remaining guests turned toward me, curiously grateful for any explanation of the evening's strange events. Blake froze mid-stride, realizing that I was about to take control of the narrative. 30 minutes ago, my daughter's fiancé told me to leave this wedding celebration because my presence was making his guests uncomfortable. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the ugly truth became public knowledge. Emma's hands flew to her mouth in horror, and Blake's parents exchanged shocked glances across the room. I continued calmly. "This is the same man who insisted I spend my entire life savings to pay for this venue, these decorations, and this catering. The same man who criticized my appearance, my home, and my lifestyle throughout their engagement. When he ordered me to leave quietly, I decided to show him exactly what my money was worth." Blake tried to interrupt with denials and explanations, but Sarah stepped forward with professional authority. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Mrs. Johnson's attorney," she announced clearly. "We're here to ensure that my client's financial interests are properly protected following this breach of respect and dignity." The remaining guests were riveted by the unfolding drama, some pulling out phones to record the confrontation. Blake's wealthy family members looked mortified as their son's cruelty became public knowledge. Several of Emma's nursing colleagues nodded approvingly, clearly understanding the justice of my actions. Emma finally found her voice, approaching me, with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I had no idea he said that to you. I'm so sorry. I should have defended you better throughout this whole process." Her apology was genuine, but it couldn't undo months of watching her choose Blake's approval over my feelings. Blake made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation, claiming that his words had been misunderstood and that family was important to him. But other guests began sharing their own uncomfortable experiences with his behavior, painting a clear picture of his consistent arrogance and disrespect toward anyone he considered beneath his social status. The venue coordinator approached nervously to explain that without confirmed payments for several key services, the event couldn't continue as planned. Blake's parents exchanged frantic whispers about covering costs, but the damage to their son's reputation was already irreversible. Their perfect wedding had become a cautionary tale about treating people with basic human dignity. Security arrived to escort Blake and his family from the premises after they became increasingly belligerent about the situation. As they were led toward the exit, Blake shouted accusations and threats, but his words only reinforced how right I'd been to trust my instincts about his character. Emma watched her fiancé's true nature emerge completely, finally seeing him clearly for the first time. The weeks following the canceled wedding were a mixture of healing and growth for both Emma and me. She moved back into my small apartment, temporarily sleeping in her old bedroom, surrounded by childhood memories, while we both processed the traumatic experience. Those first few days were filled with long conversations, tears, and the gradual rebuilding of trust between us. Emma struggled with overwhelming guilt about not recognizing Blake's treatment of me sooner. She'd been so blinded by his charm and the excitement of planning a dream wedding that she'd overlooked his consistent disrespect toward the person who mattered most in her life. I reassured her repeatedly that love often makes us see what we want to see, and that learning to recognize red flags was part of growing up. Financial recovery proved easier than emotional healing. Several vendors refunded partial payments out of sympathy for the situation, and the venue coordinator waived certain fees after learning the full story of Blake's behavior. The photography company kept their equipment fee but returned the service payment, while the florist offered to create new arrangements for a future celebration at no additional cost. Our weekly coffee dates resumed with deeper meaning than they'd ever held before. Emma began sharing her true feelings about the months of wedding planning, admitting that she'd felt increasingly uncomfortable with Blake's demands, but hadn't known how to address her concerns. She'd feared that questioning his decisions would make her appear ungrateful for the expensive celebration he was planning. Therapy helped Emma process her feelings about the failed relationship and her role in enabling Blake's disrespectful behavior. Dr. Martinez, a counselor who specialized in family dynamics, helped my daughter understand that standing up for loved ones was an essential part of healthy relationships. Emma learned that true partners support and honor each other's families, rather than demanding their exclusion. As months passed, Emma gradually returned to her confident, compassionate self. Without Blake's constant criticism and control, she rediscovered her own preferences and opinions. She started dating again eventually, but with new awareness about recognizing genuine respect versus manipulation in relationships. The men she chose to spend time with now were required to demonstrate kindness toward me from the very beginning. I discovered my own strength through the experience of standing up to Blake. For too many years, I'd prioritized keeping peace over defending my dignity, accepting disrespect to avoid conflict. Learning that I could fight back effectively and protect both myself and Emma from toxic relationships felt incredibly empowering. I started setting firmer boundaries in all areas of my life. Our relationship emerged stronger than it had ever been. Emma developed deep appreciation for the sacrifices I'd made throughout her childhood, and she began actively looking for ways to support and honor me in return. She insisted on contributing to household expenses and started planning special outings to show her gratitude for everything I'd provided over the years. The experience taught us both invaluable lessons about recognizing authentic love versus superficial attraction. Real love honors and includes family members rather than demanding their elimination. Healthy relationships build people up instead of tearing them down, and partners should enhance each other's lives without requiring fundamental changes to core values or important relationships. I reflected often on the deeper meaning of that awful wedding day. Sometimes, protecting someone we love means allowing them to face the consequences of their choices, rather than enabling destructive behavior. If I'd remained silent about Blake's treatment, Emma might have married him and spent years in an emotionally abusive relationship. The story spread through our community, becoming a cautionary tale about standing up for dignity and self-respect. Other mothers shared similar experiences of being disrespected by their children's partners, and several found courage to address their own situations after hearing about my confrontation with Blake. Emma eventually met David, a kind pediatric nurse who treated me with genuine warmth and respect from their first introduction. He asked thoughtful questions about my life and interests, remembered details from our conversations, and actively included me in their relationship milestones. When they became engaged 2 years later, he personally asked for my blessing and insisted that I play a central role in their wedding planning. Their simple, heartfelt ceremony in our local park cost a fraction of Blake's elaborate production, but felt infinitely more meaningful. David's family welcomed me warmly, treating me as an honored guest rather than an embarrassing obligation. Emma glowed with authentic happiness, as she married a man who loved and respected every part of her life, including her relationship with me. Looking back, I realized that Blake's cruelty had actually been a gift in disguise. His demand for my removal forced me to choose between continued submission and fierce self-advocacy. Choosing to fight back not only saved Emma from a terrible marriage, but also taught both of us essential lessons about dignity, respect, and unconditional love. The $28,000 I'd spent and lost was a small price to pay for protecting my daughter from a lifetime of emotional manipulation. True love never demands that we eliminate important relationships or compromise our fundamental values. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when doing so requires tremendous courage. Now, as I watch Emma build a healthy marriage with someone who honors our bond, I feel profound gratitude for the strength I found that day. Standing up to Blake changed the trajectory of both our lives, proving that sometimes the right choice is also the hardest one, and that defending our dignity is always worth whatever it costs. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with others who might need to hear about the importance of standing up for themselves. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in unexpected moments. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your dignity is never negotiable. May you always find the courage to defend what matters most, even when it feels impossible. Wishing you all the love and respect you deserve.